Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for dialing in. We've got a few probably still streaming in, but we'll just let them in as they arrive, but otherwise we'll get underway. My name's Charlie Thomas. I'm the General Manager of Corporate Affairs here at the NFF, and along with the other people that you see on the screen, have been helping along the way over the last couple of years to deliver the NFF's data stewardship work. I'd like to begin by just acknowledging country. So I'm joining you today from Melbourne on Wurundjeri country, and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and extend that respect to the country of where everyone is dialing in from around the country today. So in a pretty short session today, we're going to take about 45 minutes to run through the latest on the NFF's farm data code work and a new certification scheme that's now available to providers as of last week. So first, we're going to hear from David Jahinki. David's our Vice President at the NFF. He's a farmer in the Wimmera region in Western Victoria. And DJ, as we call him, has been part of the working group process along the way, and also obviously sits on the NFF board. And going forward, is going to be chairing the certification panel that sits behind the certification process that we'll learn a bit more about in the next 45 minutes. So I'll hand over to you, DJ, just for a bit of an overview from the NFF as to why we're doing this and what we're hoping to achieve.
Thanks, Charlie, and welcome everybody to find out more about what is the data code and the certification process. For starters, modern agriculture is pretty amazing. The technology, the different equipment, the different practices that we have applied not only in the past generations, but future generations to come. And the fact of the matter is, we generate a lot of data from our machinery use, data from our production, data from our inputs, data from our finances. And this data is valuable, but it's only valuable when it's used in the right way and the right processes under the right conditions. And I guess for us, we recognize that data is an important piece, not only for the farmers themselves, but then also for the wider industry to use so that they can develop up products, they can develop up their supply chains, they can develop up new innovation. And for us, that's what we want to do. In agriculture, we want to embrace the brightest and the best. We want to make sure that we're getting access to some of the leading edge technology. And to do that, we also want to engage with some blue sky thinking. And so for us, the two-step process that we're going to explain today is the development of the data code, which is a set of guidelines of how companies can come in and be a part of a system where it's very structured to understand what's in, what's out, what best practice looks like, and what the expectations are on behalf of agriculture. But then also from the farmer's perspective, how can we see a certification, understand that it's somebody's gone through this process, and that's where the certification panel comes in. And we'll explain that a little bit more later, but the two steps are, once again, the code, which has gone through its second iteration, which has occurred over the last 18 months, and then secondly, the panel process. And as the VFF board sees this as an opportunity, as once again, that innovation, that ensuring that there's guide rails for incubation hubs, making sure that anybody with those great ideas can keep within a sphere of their own imagination, but yet know how, when they do collect data, what the best appropriate way is to use it, and how they can give benefit back to the wider industry. We've seen these codes both in the US and New Zealand, and we've stolen a lot of those good ideas. And I give full credit to the working group, of which you'll hear Andrea, who has chaired that process, all the great work that they've done. But for us, once again, it's making sure that we've got some assurance that people are managing this wealth of knowledge that we've got in the best possible way, and then also making sure that farmers have some sort of yardstick to understand and acknowledge that the different companies are willing to sign up to this voluntary scheme to ensure that there's a standard and a practice across the whole industry. So for us, it's exciting. And on behalf of the NFF board and the wider team that's been a part of this, we think that this will be a cornerstone, once again, for innovation moving forward.
Going to unmute myself. Thanks so much, DJ. I'll hand over now to Andrea Koch. As DJ mentioned, Andrea had chaired the Farm Data Working Group. Andrea, you can correct me. I'm going to say for 3 years, possibly closer to five years.
It's been a long time.
It flew. And Andrew's really been the driving force within the NFF for a lot of this work, and has been our, I guess, our conscience and our, the person who's kept us motivated to stay on and deliver what we delivered so far. So Andrea helped deliver the first version of the farm data code and then steered the working group process through to deliver version 2, which has just been released. So Andrea, I'll hand over to you to give a bit more context and background as to how this has all come together.
Thanks very much, Charlie, and thanks, DJ, for that great intro. I'll just share my screen. So can we all see that one?
Yep, if you just make it full screen, maybe, Andrew.
It should be this one, I think. Oh, that might not work. Sorry.
That's it.
Okay. Can we see? Can everyone see? Can everyone see that?
Perfect. Now it's disappeared.
Okay, I'll just try again. Hang on. Okay, well, thanks very much, Charlie and DJ, for that great intro, and I hope that this is coming up now. There we go. Can everyone see that? I think if I do that, it's knocking you out.
We can see it though, Andrew.
Oh, you can go. Okay. I think this is my old computer that's having a bit of trouble. So I'm just going to do it like this.
While Andrew's doing that, I'll just say we are going to do some Q&A at the end. So you've got access to the chat. Please jump in and post your questions as we go, as you think of them, and we'll come back to them for people to answer at the end.
Okay. All right. So hopefully you can see that now.
Can't, unfortunately.
Okay, there you go. Can you see that one?
Yep, perfect.
Great. I'm just going to run with that. Sorry. Okay, so yes, I've been involved with the Farm Data Working Group for, it is 5 years, and I'll give you a bit of an overview of where we've been and where we've come from in that 5 years. What is the Farm Data Working Group? So basically, it's a group that was established back in 2018. And it was really put together at the instigation of the industry and coming out of a process which some of you will be aware of, which was when the RDCs got together, the Research Development Corporations got together and put together the Precision to Decision research project, which was a really wide-ranging research project, which was looking at how digital and data-driven agriculture was coming into play, and was Australian agriculture going to be ready for it? And so there was a number of reports that came out of that process, and one of the recommendations was that there needed to be industry leadership to start to look at data governance, and in particular to at least to get a data code up and running. So NFF stepped up to the plate and took leadership of that process. Established the Farm Data Working Group, and we've had a number of people contribute to that working group over the 5 years. And that was made up of people from our members, from farmers, from technology service providers, academics and researchers and lawyers. And our remit was to develop clear, ethical and efficient agricultural data practices, or at least to put the code together so that we could be heading in that direction. And to oversee the development of this code and the certification process. And throughout the whole process, we have been farmer-centric. After all, NFF is the peak body for farmers in Australia and for farming bodies in Australia. And we really felt that we needed to bring the farmers' view to this whole process. So we've done that. So I'll just go through a bit of the history of where we've come from. So as I mentioned, the Precision to Decision reports, and there was actually 5 reports that came out in 2017. And there was a survey that was done, which I'll reference a little further on. But there was also a report specifically looking at the legal dimensions of decision or digital agriculture. And one of the, as I said, the recommendations out of that was that we at least needed to have in Australia a data code, a code of conduct, a voluntary code of conduct that service providers could use to understand, you know, the best practice in terms of managing farm data. So NFF held a data governance, the first data governance workshop in Sydney in July of 2018. The working group was formed coming out of that process. And in 2019, we set about putting version 1 of the Farm Data Code together. That was launched, version 1.0 was launched at Evoke Ag in February 2020. And I remember it very clearly because it was only a few weeks later that we all then went into lockdown. And so that whole sort of COVID period did sort of slow things down quite a bit. But we were able to then come back in 2021, at the end of 2021. And by that stage, we had gained some funding from the Department of Agriculture, Water and Environment. And that enabled us to engage Gabby Saragra, who is with us today and going to speak after me. And we reconvened the working group in order to do a review of the code and then put this certification process in place. And so that's what we really worked on during 2022. And here we are now in 2023, and we've now launched version 2 of the code, and we now have established the certification process. And Gabby will go through that in some detail after I've finished. So I just wanted to quickly give you a bit of a high level of what is the code. And, I'm really sort of pleased with the fact that we've been able to get this code into something that's very accessible by everybody. And I like to say it's 6 principles and that are encapsulated in 6 words. And those 6 words are, number 1, transparency, which is where service providers are transparent about how they're generating data on behalf of their customers, their farmers, what they're doing with that data and how it's been shared and so forth. The second one is fairness, which is, are farmers getting fair value out of the data that's being collected? The third one is control. Do farmers actually have control over their data, their farm data? The fourth one is portability, which means can their data be moved from one provider to another provider, for example, or taken from out of one situation and into another situation. The fifth one is security, which is, how is the data actually being managed? Where is it being hosted? What happens? How secure is it in terms of cyber attacks and those sorts of things? And the last one is compliance, which is, is the data being used in such a way that it's compliant with, for example, the Privacy Act and other sort of legal requirements. The focus of the code is that it's been designed to apply to entities which have a direct commercial relationship with a farmer and that are collecting, interpreting or managing data in connection with that relationship. And it is based on contract law. The idea that there's a contract between a service provider and a farmer to provide a service which is generating data. And the reason for that is because, as was highlighted in the Legal Dimensions report, is that contract law really is the only sound legal basis platform that we have for ensuring that these commitments can be made. So service providers are encouraged to use the code to prepare their data usage policies, and farmers are encouraged to use the code to ask questions of service providers about how some of these principles are being addressed in their contracts. And we've now added this certification process whereby service providers can apply to be certified against the code. There's quite a stringent process that NFF applies, which Gabby will take us through, and they then will get the tick of approval that yes, they are compliant with the code, or that they need to do some work, to become compliant. So what this enables them to have is that they are enabled to be differentiated in the marketplace, and the goal is to give farmers comfort that in sharing their data and having their data generated, and overall that we can uplift industry data management practices. So I just wanted to spend a couple of minutes on the why. Why have we done this and why do we need it? Well, as we know, as we all know, and certainly people in this that are here in this webinar will be aware, is that the world's becoming digitised, and we're really rapidly moving towards data-driven agriculture and digital agriculture. And I think that this picture really sums it up: is that we've not been here before. This is new territory for everybody, not just in agriculture, but across the board. And so we need to be preparing for, what does that mean, and how do we make sure that we can do business with confidence moving forward. The second aspect of it is, and this kind of harks back to what did come out of the P2D, the precision to decision process, was that we found back then in 2017 that there was a lack of confidence and a lack of trust. And that came through in this report. Things like farmers having a low level of comfort in service providers having access to their data, or this one, that they had a low level of trust in service providers and technology providers maintaining privacy of their data, and they were also concerned and had a low level of trust around technology and service providers, sharing data with third parties. So that was something that really needed to be addressed in order to get to a point where, farmers would be comfortable with how data is being used and managed and shared, and that in turn will promote adoption of digital agricultural technology, which is where we need to get to. And then the third thing I would say about this is that it's really about the code really fits into an overall framework of data governance. And again, this comes back to some of the findings out of that P2D report, which is that at that point, and I believe this is still the case really, is that the legal and regulatory frameworks around agricultural data are quite piecemeal, fragmented and ad hoc. And that because of the absence of clear and consistent data governance within our rural industries, that has the potential to expose producers to threats to the privacy, security and safety of their agricultural data, and this in turn is going to limit the potential benefits that can be derived from agricultural data. So I just want to get across this idea that we do need a data governance framework for agricultural data, and that the Farm Data Code is one piece of that overall data governance framework. And a really important part, but there's a lot more work that needs to be done to ensure that we can keep building this platform, this framework of data governance that will give both service providers and farmers confidence moving forward. So that's it from me, but I just also wanted at this point to give a big shout out and thanks to all of the members of the working group over the last 5 years. We've actually had 2 different groups over that time. We had a bit of a renewal in 2021 as we went into this last piece of work. And so there's been, at least a dozen people, I think, that have been involved in the working group. And we do sort of call them out on the NFF website. But I just wanted to say thank you to all of the people that gave up their time, contributed their expertise and their passion really into this process. And I also want to thank Charlie, who's been there throughout and been the sort of person behind the scenes at NFF that's carried this forward, and to Gabby, who's really done an amazing amount of work and has just really brought something very special to this whole process and helped us to get to this point. So thank you to all those people. So that's it from me.
Thanks so much, Andrew. And thanks again to you for all the work that you've put into this over so many years. It's just been invaluable, and I don't think we'd be where we are without the work that you've done. So thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you.
And we'll hand over now to Gabby. Speaking of people who do all the work, Gabby has done a lot of the work over the last 18 months to really bring this thing to life and make sure we've got a version 2 of the code and got a certification scheme that people can participate in. And Gabby will be the key point of contact for any providers on the call looking to get certified going forward. So Gabby is your main person, and Gabby, I'll hand over to you to just walk us through exactly what's changed and how the certification process is going to work.
Thank you so much. So excited to be finally launching code version 2 in the certification. And yeah, so much work has gone into it. And thank you, Charlie and Andrea, for your guidance, and DJ, the chair of our new certification panel.
Mm-hmm.
So very, very exciting. Let me just share my screen. So I will also attempt the full screen share. Then I won't be able to see you. How's that?
That's looking good, Gabby.
Ah, perfect. All right, wonderful. So let's start off with our purpose statement for the Farm Data Code. And I'll read it out to you because it's quite important. So the Australian Farm Data Code aims to promote adoption of digital technology by ensuring that farmers have comfort in how their data is used, managed, and shared. So a very important thing here, and something DJ touched on as well, is that we really want adoption of technology and we want innovation. And how do we create an environment where farmers are happy to share their data because the right safeguards and guidelines are in place? And the code represents those protections that our farmers want to see in the technology data products and services that are out in the marketplace. So it's our way, it's the farmer's way of communicating out to the market what their requirements for data management are. Yeah, very important is that it's absolutely here to stimulate innovation and data sharing. So what I'm going to talk to you about today is Farm Data Code version 2, which, as you've heard, has been developed over the last, 5 years, but the version 2 is the last 18 months. And then this actual certification, which is a brand new program that we're launching with you here today. So I'm going to go through the changes from version 1 to version 2 and then go into more depth about what the certification entails. So just quickly about the benefits, which is also something that we're going out and promoting and doing a lot of campaigns with farmers and with providers over the next year and a half. And for any farmers on the call today, the message I really want to give you is that the code sets the standards and all the requirements that the farming community has, and that's our communication tool to providers of what we want them to do. It also gives you a framework for asking providers the right questions. So now that you have the code, you can use that to go and ask your provider, what are you doing in your terms and conditions? What are you doing about security? What are you doing about portabilities? Now you've got those principles and the specific questions you can ask from that. And we will also be creating collateral and how-to guides and that you can use to have those conversations ongoing. The certification itself will allow you farmers to see if a provider actually meets the code. And if they don't fully meet it, then through the audit report, you'll be able to see which principles they comply with, which they don't. And so all that what we really want is to empower farmers with this information around the transparency of a product and a provider does, and help you make better buying decisions. For providers, we want to encourage farmers to trust you. And so creating this, the certification program will allow you to be transparent in a consistent way and create goodwill and trust with farmers. And it's fine if there's imperfect compliance. And I'll talk about that later because we've definitely set the bar high, and that's for a good reason. And we don't expect everyone to be perfect first up, but it's going to be a learning journey for us all. And that transparency and certification will differentiate the products, projects and services in the market. And it proves best practice. If you're a provider that's already doing all the right things, this is a way to prove that to farmers and to your users. We'll also be providing support on implementing the code. So we're not just going to leave you with the code and leave you to your own devices. There's a team of us that will be supporting you through that process, giving best practice advice, and also connecting you to what other providers are doing so you can all learn and share as an industry. And of course, last but not least, the NFF provides the avenue for you to communicate with farmers. And I'll touch on that a little bit later as well. So that's really important that we all work together, farmers and providers, keep evolving the code as new technology emerges, new laws, all sorts of new things in industry. So we can be your conduit to the farmer community. So let's have a look at now the differences between version 1 and version 2 of the code. I'll start off with what's been added, and then I'll move on to what's been removed. So what we've done is we've really refined the definition of farm data, and now there's a helpful diagram in the code that you can use this flowchart to figure out whether you are handling farm data or not. So something that was very interesting for us to work through, and we tested it on about more than 30 scenarios. And a lot of questions that come up are, what about satellite images? What about government data? So we've factored all those scenarios in and created this flowchart. I would love to hear any scenarios that don't fit this flowchart, because again, we need to keep refining and evolving this as we go along. So really would appreciate you to take it, go out, test it in your own environments, and let me know if there's anything missing. A couple of other additions to the transparency principle is we also want to provide transparency to farmers about any other data over and above farm data itself that will be collected, created, aggregated, used or shared by the provider. And so the reason for that is we're not trying to give farmer control over that data, but we want them to be aware of what else is happening that's about them, even if it doesn't fit that really specific definition of farm data that I just talked about. In Principle 1.2, we now require express consent to the provider's terms, so making sure that farmer has an opportunity to agree and to those terms and any changes to those terms. In Principle 2.2, making sure that there's no detriment to farmers without their consent. And in Principle 3.2, that third parties have the equivalent data terms and practices and comply with the code. And I've got a little picture there of a very weak link. And so what we're trying to do is prevent this weak link as farm data moves down the supply chain or to other third parties beyond the farmer. We don't want anyone dropping the ball and letting that data loose or not giving the farmer the same rights and permissions that they had under the original contract. Under Principle 3.3, the farmer can now request corrections to their farm data. Principle 3.5, we want providers to ensure they avoid as much as possible the identification or re-identification of farmers without their consent. 4.2, if data is able to be ported, which it should be under the portability principle, that there is some documentation provided. And that's important because sometimes you just get an extract into an Excel file and the farmer actually can't work with that, or it's difficult for it to be ported to another system without understanding what that data exactly is. Principle 4.5, warning of changes to the legal status of the provider. And that's important, for example, if a provider is selling their legal entity overseas, and often that data then goes with it. Now, we want farmers to know about it and have an opportunity to then either delete their account or move their data out or continue to stay with that provider. But it should be an informed choice that they make. And lastly there, making sure that if and when the service is terminated, either by the farmer or the provider, there is an opportunity for farmer to take their data with them and also have it deleted on the provider's end. Now, some items that we have removed from version 1, which was reference to the Privacy Act, because we don't need to reiterate what that says. The Privacy Act stands on its own and it covers our personal information. And what the code really is here to do is to close the gap between the Privacy Act and the protections on farm business data. So that's really important because at the moment, there's only contract law there and regulation is lagging behind in terms of business data and its protections. We've also removed the requirement for providers to keep records on processes and decision-making relating to data. And that was it's a very broad requirement. You know, you start, especially when we started working through the certification, it was like, well, what records and what processes, you know, and it was like, how long is a piece of string? And we felt that from the pain points that we were seeing from the farmers' point of view, that also wasn't a very important priority. So we're focusing on the 6 principles that we've got in the code. And then the last one is we had previously we had a requirement to notify a farmer when an attempt has been made to breach farm data. But as we know these days, there's hundreds of attempts to breach data, and you know, some are successful, and definitely the ones that are successful, farmers should be notified about. But the hundreds of attempts that get made, that would just create unnecessary information overload for farmers. Perfect. All right. So now I'll go into an overview of the certification and how that works. So at a very high level, the overview of the certification, so it was developed by the same farm data working group that Andrea was chairing. And we've had farmers and their providers, industry experts, and researchers as well. And we then we designed the certification framework, and then we piloted it with 8 providers in late 2022. Got a lot of feedback, and then fed all that back and improved the framework, made sure it was tested out in some real life scenarios so that it worked once it was out in the workplace. Not saying it's perfect, of course there'll be improvements, and we're really, really keen to see how it plays out over a really large ecosystem of providers. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to seeing how it applies to all sorts of new technologies that are coming out. But yeah, we have a feedback mechanism to keep improving it and building in those learnings. Something that's really important is that the certification is for a product, a service, or a project, not for the provider as a whole. And that's very important. But just because a provider gets one product certified doesn't mean that all products in the future or all the other products are also certified by default, because often they work on different infrastructure and have different scope as well. And then, as I mentioned before, we've set a higher standard with the code and the certification. It's above transparency. So the US and the New Zealand codes and certifications are really about transparency, but we're actually setting some minimum must-haves as well. And because we know it's a higher standard, we don't expect 100% everyone to get 100% in the first year or two. And so what we've got is an audit report. So any provider that applies will get an audit report and then certification if they get 100%, but we're definitely not expecting everyone to get that upfront. The legal recourse for farmers is that there's the contract with the provider, as Andrea mentioned, and there was also a statutory declaration that we asked the provider to fill in to say that all the information they have provided for the certification is true and correct, and that's signed by a company officer. Now, something we won't be checking for is whether the contracts are fair under Australian law. We leave that up to Australian law, and New South Wales has got a number of unfair practices that have just been incorporated. So that's something we're not checking for, whether the contract is legally sound. We're just checking that the contract and the provider's policies comply with the farm data code. And we're also not assessing the quality of any products or services. So that's important. So who's the certification for? It's for any provider of data and technology products and services who has a direct contract with farmers and handle farm data. However, we really encourage anyone handling farm data to comply with the code. And that might mean downstream suppliers who don't have direct contracts with farmers, but do still get farm data that had originated off a farm. Research organizations, government agencies, anyone who might also be using farm data from other sources. And we will be extending the code to cover those use cases in the future. We need to go through another pilot process and test it out in the marketplace, just like we've done with this version. But yes, even if you can't get certified, you can still get support from our team, and you can still get a letter of advice about how you might be able to implement the code. So I mentioned this before, but I really want to drive this home that our goal is to uplift industry practices. We're not all going to be perfect from the get-go because we have set the standard high. And what you might see for a provider, when you get their report, which looks very much like this, is there might not be ticks everywhere, and that's absolutely fine. Where we want to go is we want to improve and uplift our industry as a whole, and give farmers that confidence that the providers are engaged, they're participating, they're willing to get assessed and be transparent, and then they're willing to improve their practices. And in the pilot, we actually had 3 providers change their terms and conditions already. So that's exactly what we want to see, improvement and a move towards full compliance over time. So how do you apply? We've got our website. And you can, there's all the steps are listed there, but I'll briefly go through them on the following page. But this is the page for providers where you've got the list of steps and how to apply and all your forms and contract that you need to complete. And in a nutshell, these are the steps. So best thing is just to contact us at farmdatacode@nff.org.au, and we'll have an introductory meeting. I'll take you through all the different documents and help you understand like the scope and how long it might take for you. And we can also fill everything in together. So you don't have to go off and just struggle with any forms. We can fill them in together. Usually takes 2 or 3 hours. And then what's important is also to make sure there's people from your team available to go through the process. And for small to medium organizations, say up to 50 staff, what we found in the pilot was it'll probably take a maximum of 2 or 3 days, and that's across all your legal team, IT, and product staff. And a lot of that is just filling in the original application form and then having a couple of meetings with me to refine your answers. So when you're ready to, when you've got all your team in place, and then you need to pay your fee and submit the application form, the declaration form, and the provider agreement, and I'll be helping you throughout that whole process. If you're then eligible for the certification, that your application will go to the certification panel. Otherwise, you'll get an audit report like the one we just saw, and that will be published on the NFF website. So finally, call to action for everyone. Providers, definitely get assessed and certified if you can. Engage the farmer community through the NFF. We're here to help you if there's questions. What do farmers want? We can go back. We've got a whole lot of groups and members that we can then engage on your behalf. Please provide feedback on the code. If you see something that doesn't work for your product or your service, that's the kind of feedback we need to keep improving the code, and spread the word with in the AgTech community. For farmers, ask your providers, are they going to get certified? Are they complying with the code? Have they heard about the code? Definitely point them back to us if they need more information. And then as providers get assessed, what you'll see on our website is those audit reports being added. And so eventually you'll be able to refer to that and see a whole lot of audit reports before you even go to make a purchasing decision. And of course, farmers, for you as well, provide feedback on the code. If there's any pain points you're having with data or technology that you think should go into the code for future principles, future guidelines for providers, please send them in, get engaged. The code is here as a conduit between farmers and providers. It's a way to communicate the farming community's wants and needs around data management, and we all need to shape that code together. And the more we all engage together, the stronger the trust will be between our two communities. Thank you. And all inquiries, please, to farmdatacode@nff.org.au.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that, Gabby. And hopefully we haven't been so comprehensive that we've exhausted all potential questions, because we do have about 5 minutes left if people do have burning questions about how any of this is going to work or any of the process that sat behind the development of version 2. So please jump in the chat in your Teams thing and shoot through any questions that you might have. I had a couple as we're going through there, Gabby, so while people think I might ask you a Dixer, the audit report and just we saw there the front page of the report and just the simple tick, no tick. Will there be an opportunity for providers to explain why they might not have a tick? Will that be part of it?
Yes, absolutely. In the comprehensive report, there'll be a page for each of the, let me see if I can pull it up really quickly. There will be a page for each of the principles and an opportunity for the provider to comment and explain why they might, maybe that principle, maybe it's something that they've got as a work in progress that they're still implementing, or a policy that's still being written. Let me just give you a very quick look at that. So we can see here, this is the summary page, but actually each section goes into great detail, and each principle itself will have a page where you have the principle, and then whether the provider meets that principle, and the opportunity for them to comment here on why they might not be meeting it. Or even if they do meet it, they might want to provide a bit more of an explanation about what exactly it is that they do. And we do also have a helpful one-pager summary of the provider's terms that farmers can use and providers can use to promote their own products and services, with kind of the top 10 questions. What's the data that you've got on me? You know, why are you collecting it? Who are you sharing it with? Is it being de-identified? Where is it stored? Can I get a copy? Can I get it deleted? In which countries is it made available? What are the benefits to me, and are there any risks? And so, like, this is really the summary of the entire process that we're going through, even though we delve a lot deeper and get evidence for each of these things. This is like a very quick, so there's a quick summary, but there's also the very comprehensive report where the provider can comment.
That's great. Thanks, Gabby. And comment there from Clary in New Zealand that they're looking to now take some of what we've done here and apply it in New Zealand, which is high praise, given that's what we sort of did in the first instance, was take what had been done in New Zealand and brought it here. Andrew, did you want to speak a bit to that, just about, you know, where we sat in terms of the other countries who had moved on this first and how we kind of incorporated some of that? You're on mute.
Yeah. So back in 2017, I think at that point, the US and New Zealand had already gone down this path. The US had established a set of farm data privacy and security principles, and New Zealand had really done a very comprehensive effort across this whole space around data governance. So we were able to to use that as a springboard, if you like. The Europeans came along a bit later with a document, probably, yeah. So we've basically been able to incorporate all of that into our thinking, but then really to make sure that it works in the Australian context, and that it makes sure that it works for Australian service providers and farmers. And I think we have hopefully kind of stretched the boundary on that data governance approach and taken it out to a new level. And, you know, if other countries now build on what we've done, that's fantastic. We'd be delighted to be in that, in that situation. We've still got to prove it to ourselves first. So, the more that we can get people jumping in and engaging, and, the better it will be over time. And the other thing I just wanted to comment on is that this is a living document. You know, we've had one formal review. We will continue, or NFF will continue to review the code as conditions in the marketplace change, as technology changes, as new things come along, but also to make sure that it's always fit for purpose as a data governance instrument. So yeah.
Wonderful.
Can I also add in there just very quickly? We're probably more aligned to the European GDPR, which is their personal privacy standard and legislation, which is the highest standard in the world for personal. But we've gone over and above that and extended it to farm business information. So business information is not protected like this anywhere, but it should be.
Wonderful. Well, we're right at time, so we'll close it off there. Thank you so much, everyone, for taking the time to dial in and learn a bit more about what we're doing. I'm sure as you get off this and think a little bit more about it, you'll probably have burning questions, and that Farm Data Code email address is the best place to reach us at to discuss this. So farmdatacode@nff.org.au. And hopefully there are dozens of providers on the line just ready and raring to get certified after learning about this, because that will be the test of this whole process. And so please do just reach out, have a conversation. We're really keen just to talk to you, learn more about, you know, what your pain points might be and how we can help. So please do that. And with that, we will sign it off. Thanks everyone for joining.
Thanks so much. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.